We've done the quarterbacks, the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Now it's time to wrap up our Power Four college fantasy football ranking series with our sleeper picks. These are the mid-round guys, maybe a little bit later in your drafts. The best part about playing college fantasy football is there is value to be had in each and every round. Sometimes you're playing NFL fantasy, John, and by round 8 or 9, you're just kind of, you're really picking from the bottom of the barrel. When you draft guys in 8, 9, 10, 15 of college fantasy football, you could still be getting league winners. So John and myself have each identified a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and a flex. So you're going to have 8 total sleeper picks to take away from this episode.
If you just go back 1 year, Matt, and in the big tournaments like Underdog, you had Tyler Warren and John Mateer of Washington State and Penn State, respectfully. If you had those 2 late round pickups, you probably made it really, really far in the tournament. And then you had in regular season leagues, Caleb Johnson, Desmond Reed off the waiver wire. So it's very different in college fantasy football than it is in NFL fantasy football. And we have 8 sleepers tonight who right now I'm looking at the board. They're, in a Power 4, they're well below 100. In a group of the full FBS, some of them are over 200. So, Matt, who are we going to kick it off? What 2 quarterbacks do we like this week?
So part of what I like about the way we formatted this show, John, is we've not only identified players we've liked, but I think it's an opportunity to identify some process as well. And I think that there's going to be a common theme. I'll speak for my quarterback here, but I think you're going to have a similar case for your quarterback. One of the ways to really get value in CFF is to identify a scheme, right? So maybe you're not totally invested in the player, but you trust the scheme, you trust the play calling. And with that being said, I'll let you start with your quarterback here, Kaidon Salter, formerly of Liberty. Now he's taking the Shedeur Sanders spot at Colorado.
Throughout this early season process, I have noticed that Kaidon Salter is clearly being overlooked, Matt. It's kind of crazy, but at the same time, I understand why. His current ADP in FBS, full FBS drafts is about 200. Probably going around in Power 2 drafts or Power 4 only drafts, probably around the 120 mark, somewhere's in there. The young man was a 4-star recruit in high school and the number 7 quarterback in the nation. He enrolls at Tennessee and he redshirts in 2021. In 2022 for the Volunteers, he played in 8 games and he only started 4. This is still something I kind of don't understand, Matt. He ends up leaving Tennessee. It's kind of shocking that he gets out of Knoxville.
It was behavior related.
Oh, okay.
Reportedly. It was reportedly behavior related. I don't think he chose to leave on his own, reportedly.
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense because I don't dig deep to off the field problems sometimes. He transfers to Liberty, Matt. And in 2023, he was simply incredible. 35.5 fantasy points per game. This is how incredible of a passer he is. 2,876 yards passing and 32 touchdowns. Now, why this is so interesting, you might say to yourself, those numbers are pretty good for passing. Matt, he had over 1,000 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns. I mean, those passing numbers combined with the rushing are simply incredible. He's in real elite category. Last year, though, Matt, I drafted him in the Kings Classic. I drafted him a bunch of times in the first 5. He crashed and burned. But so did the whole Flames offense. He scored only 24.1 fantasy points. Matt, in context, that's not awful. If we got 24.1 in round 15, we would all be happy with Salter. Why we didn't like the production was we paid a 5th pick overall for him sometimes. He had 1,886 yards passing, 15 touchdowns. Matt, he frustrated me all the year. I watched him a lot. He only had 587 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. I thought he left yards rushing on the field. I really did, and it was frustrating to watch. But he ended up entering the portal again, and he lands in Colorado. Now, when you look, if you think quickly, you might think it's not a good spot. They lose Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, Will Shepherd, a wide receiver. Those are all very good wide receivers. But I'll give Dion credit in this coaching staff, Matt. They brought in Joseph Williams from Tulsa, who we talked about on our wide receiver show. Then they have the Miller brothers. Not brothers, that's a metaphor. They're not actual brothers. Omarion Hampton and Draylon Miller. They're not as solid. Obviously, you don't have the Heisman winner. But I think the receivers are pretty good, Matt. And they have the best offensive line since Sanders took over the program. I think he realized early after 2023, if he doesn't address this offensive line, he's never really going to turn around the program. Salter's coming at such a cheap price, Matt. And here's what I like about him. He's your third quarterback. You're looking for ceiling. Matt, what if he hits his ceiling? What if he's just a happy medium and he scores 30 points a game? I mean, you've got to like his upside in this Buffalo's offense. I think he's a bargain right now. Who do you have, Matt, at quarterback?
Yeah, and the other thing about Colorado, they just don't run the ball, right? So taking the quarterback there, I think that's a good pick. You know, again, sticking with this concept of scheme, I'm going to go a little bit further west here. I'm going to go to USC, Jaden Maiava, the quarterback here that's going to be leading the Trojans in the Lincoln Riley offense. Year 2 of the Lincoln Riley offense. John, for the rookie big board patrons, I had been going through the summer scouting process, and so I watched some Makai Lemon, got into some Jacoby Lane. So, you know, by association, watched some Jaden Maiava. And I think if you just looked at the box score, you might be a little lukewarm on him. And so I understand his ADP is currently quarterback 38. Right? That's low, right? For a Lincoln Riley quarterback. And when I watched him, there's definitely development. You are leaning into a year 2 jump as the starting quarterback. But he was, 11 touchdowns for 6 interceptions last year. You extrapolate that over a full season. Remember, he was a part-time starter last season. He didn't start with that job. You extrapolate that over a season. You extrapolate a full off season of development, learning that scheme. And at the end of the day, you can get pretty far just distributing. And I just mentioned it. Makai Lemon, probably going to be a top 15, top 10 quarter or wide receiver just in terms of talent in college football, right? You have a balanced running game. We talked about Wayman Jordan in our running back rankings episode. I think Maiava is going to be in a position to succeed. He's not necessarily a dual threat quarterback, but he can run. He can use his legs. And what's interesting, John, is he had just 20 carries last year, but he had 73 as a freshman at UNLV with 277 rushing yards. But even in just the 20 carries, he had 4 touchdowns. They use him on the goal line. He's 6'4", 220. He knows how to extend his frame. And so even if he just gets, 6, 7, 8 goal line carry type touchdowns, that's going to get you pretty far. Again, we're identifying sleepers. And for quarterback 38, there's a whole heck of a lot of upside. And I'm always willing to lean into the upside in the mid to late rounds of my college fantasy football drafts.
I completely agree with you. And if you're going to win a giant tournament, I do believe you need to hit on at least one quarterback like John Mateer last year, Jaden Daniels 2 years ago, right? Who was going really late, except for Matt. Matt was way ahead of the curve on him. But if you were in a normal league, you could get Jaden Daniels as your third quarterback. If you hit on this type of quarterback, Matt, that makes all the difference. And then what if you got Cade Klubnik or Lenora Sellers at the top? This is how you win these giant quarterbacks at this position. Now, I'll say another caveat for our viewers. I wouldn't draft both of them. Draft one of them because you don't want to embrace too much risk. You need a ceiling quarterback, a nice floor like a Josh Hoover maybe. Then you go and you smash one of these high-end ceiling quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's all about balance, right? Well, Speaking of balance, let's move on to the running back position. Because this is one, I've noticed doing some college fantasy football drafts this offseason. There's a big push early and then a bit of a drop off in the middle, right? And so when you circle back to the running back position, the players that you go for, it makes a big difference in the depth of your roster and your ability to field those extra point scorers there on the bye weeks, in the flex spots, right? When the injuries pile up. These spots are really important. John, for your running back, you went with Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska.
Yeah, I've kind of grown to like him based on ADP value and looking into his profile. Right now, he's about in full FBS number 92. You're probably going to have to go 6th round in large tournaments unless someone really likes him or another viewer is watching our show today. Matt, he fits what I like. 5'11", 200-pound junior. So we've seen him on the field for the Cornhuskers already. In high school, he was a 3-star recruit, and he was a two-way player. He was Mr. Football in Minnesota. I was surprised. He had a pretty big high school career. And his senior season, Matt, this is kind of silly. 2,500 yards rushing and 42 touchdowns. I had to look that up. That is crazy good and productive. Last year for the Cornhuskers, he only averaged 11.2 fantasy points per game. But Matt, he didn't have a lot of touches. He had 591 yards rushing and a touchdown. But here's where he made his money. 40 receptions, people. 40 receptions, 290 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think Matt Rhule, this is a kind of a make or break year for him, Matt. He's beginning his 3rd year. This is his team now, right? The vast majority of the players are his recruits, his transfers. The coaching staff has put in their schemes on offense and defense. Matt Rhule has been very good in the past in college at Baylor, at Temple. I think the Cornhuskers are going to be good. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're a double win season. But if the quarterback, Dylan Raiola, plays better and this defense creates some turnovers, I like Emmett Johnson at ADP a ton.
All right, my running back here, John, I wrote him up for an article in the Rookie Big Board newsletter, which, by the way, is a new resource that we have just dropped over the last week and a half here. And the link to that newsletter will be in the episode description, completely free. Go on, check out some written articles, get weekly updates for everything happening at the Rookie Big Board, CFF, Dynasty, Devy, and otherwise. So Jaydn Ott, the running back here, transfers from Cal to Oklahoma, and I don't get it. I really don't get his ADP. I think I'm getting overexposed to him. You go back, if you just kind of look past 2024, right? You go back to 2023, over 1,300 rushing yards for Jaydn Ott that season, 12 rushing touchdowns. In 2022, as a true freshman with the Cal Bears, 170 carries, 900 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. Last season, Cal just completely collapses. Saying that offense fell apart would be generous, right? 385 rushing yards on 116 carries, 4 touchdowns. Jaydn Ott and the rest of the running back room, folks, the entire running back room transferred out. Ott, he gets a huge upgrade, much better offensive line now, and you're looking at somebody here who is going in ADP as running back 30, 70 overall. And I think it's realistic, John, to say he's going to have over 225 touches. I think it's realistic to say he's going to go over 1,000 yards. And I think it's realistic to say he's going to have double-digit touchdowns. I think maybe what's holding some folks back is, the thought it is a deep running back room. But to me, Jaydn Ott is in a tier of his own. And the other guys are fighting for those leftover touches. Javonte Barnes doesn't really scare me. Taylor Tatum hasn't really been able to make that impact. Gavin Sawchuk, been down that road before. Not interested, folks. Learned my lesson last year on Gavin Sawchuk. You mentioned John Materi earlier. It's going to be a balanced passing attack. It's going to open up some nice run lanes here. I think Jaydn Ott is absolutely in a position to succeed. And by the way, John, it's a big money year for Jaydn Ott. I watched his film. I did his tape review. he could be a top 70, top 75 NFL draft pick if he puts it all together. And I think he will with the Sooners.
You know, Matt, I've liked Jaydn Ott for a while. And now you are the third person in the last month, and I won't say who the other two, have talked about Jaydn Ott as a legitimate NFL prospect who
Absolutely.
people are eyeballing. And I do like his Phil McCall from the first 2 years. As you mentioned, not good last year, but he was also really injured. So take that into. And as I've studied the Oklahoma depth chart more and more, Jaydn Ott's the best running back on the roster. Easily, right? And there's a very interesting stat that I read on X somewheres. In college football, if you have a dual threat quarterback, your running back averages half a yard per carry more than if you don't have a running quarterback. Well, what does that tell me? John Mateer's an uber runner, right? That's going to open up running lanes for Jaydn Ott. They're going to make mistakes, linebackers and defensive linemen, who to read, who to tackle. I like Ott. He's grown on me, and his ADP is at a more than fair price.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position here. I'm really excited about the player I'm going to talk about, but I'll hold on a second. And before John gets into his wide receiver, I want to make sure folks know, this is our fifth rankings episode just for the Power Four. If you want to see our full consensus rankings for not just the Power Four, but for all college fantasy football players, the link to join our Patreon will be in the episode description, patreon.com/rookiebigboard. John, this is the first time ever we've put out our consensus rankings this early in the season. We do bonus CFF content during the season as well. Like I mentioned, those written articles, personalized advice in the Rookie Big Board Discord, all of that is available. If you're playing college fantasy football, it's a huge resource to help guide you through your drafts. Strongly encourage you to go ahead and check that out. All right, John, with that lead in here, wide receiver Kenny Johnson at a Pitt. That's your pick for the receiver position.
Doing a lot of research. When you have 136 teams, you do a lot of research at depth charts. And Pittsburgh is an offense that intrigued me. First, I like Desmond Reed. He's my number one player on the board, right? And I think Eli Holstein is being underrated. That's another story for another show. And I started to look more and more at this Pittsburgh depth chart. And Matt, what I found out is no one is drafting Pittsburgh Panther wide receivers. And Kenny Johnson is the one who stood out in OTAs. If you start researching Pittsburgh, like people on X, the beat reporters, and then you listen to interviews, Kenny Johnson seems to be the guy, Matt. He's 6'1", 200-pound junior. He's currently 258 on Fantrax ADP. So he's clearly free, even in a Power 4 best ball tournament. Last year, despite basically being an unknown, he averaged 11.4 fantasy points per game. Matt, that's not bad. I bet you if you asked 100 people, less than 5 would say he scored double-digit fantasy points. He had 74 targets, which I was surprised he had that many. 46 catches, 537 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And remember, Eli Holstein played really poorly in the second half of the year. Imagine if Holstein is healthy the whole year and stays on the field. And Matt, here's where digging matters to me. Kenny Johnson had 524 yards as a returner last year. What does that tell me? He's really dynamic with the ball in his hands, and the coaching staff wants him to have touches. He was honorable mention all ACC return specialist in 2023. In high school, he was top 20 recruit in the state of Pennsylvania. He played basketball, wrestling, and track and field. Here's what I find interesting. Pittsburgh essentially returns the same offense. They even bring back offense coordinator Cade Bell. 2023, the Panthers were 108th in offense, Matt. Last year, they rose to 31st with basically ineffective quarterback the second half of the year. The O-line, 3 starters, and Pittsburgh upgraded with two important transfers who the Panthers really like the coaching staff. And I mentioned it, Holstein returns a quarterback. Matt, I'm taking him in. This is going to sound silly. 8 of 10 drafts. Best ball, because he's sitting there in round 23.
Yeah, he's free, man.
He's free. I'm going to take him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good point. Before I even talk about my guy, that's a really good point, right? You got 20 rounds in a CFF draft. If you like somebody, draft him. You know what you can do if he busts? Put him on drop him. You can drop any guy. There's going to be guys you want from the waiver wire weeks 1 and week 2, right? So take a shot on your guy and get that heavy exposure, right? Because if he does hit, then you're not going to have to pay up on the waiver wire where, you know, in other leagues, if he didn't go drafted, then your league mates are going to have to pay up for him. All right, my guy here is Kevin Coleman, and this is somebody who I am getting a ton of exposure to. Another guy that I did a full write-up on in that article that I referenced earlier. Kevin Coleman, if you remember, this man has had a journey. And if you remember, he started as a Deion Sanders recruit at Jackson State. He was one of those big gets. I think he was a 4-star wide receiver. And it was a big deal when he chose Jackson State. You know, got overshadowed a little bit by the Travis Hunter of it all, right? But he broke 500 yards as a true freshman at Jackson State. Deion leaves, and Kevin Coleman chooses to transfer not to Colorado, but he transfers up to Louisville. A bit of a forgettable year with the Cardinals, but then he transfers again to Mississippi State. And in 2024, he has an awesome season for the Bulldogs. 74 receptions, 932 yards, 6 touchdowns. Folks, that was the offense, right?
He was the offense.
Yeah, he dominated that offense. So now he transfers again, and he's going to be at Mizzou for his final collegiate season, right? So he's with the Missouri Tigers. What do I like about the Missouri Tigers, John? 2 big things. Number 1, 120 vacated targets. That's only counting Theo Wease Jr. and Luther Burden III. So just taking the top 2 guys, you know, from the team, 120 vacated targets. I absolutely love that. I've been checking out the Missouri beat. Everything says Kevin Coleman, great spring. Kevin Coleman is in the lead to be the X wide receiver. That brings me to part 2. Eli Drinkowitz loves him an X receiver, right? Drink, he identifies his guy. He feeds his guy, right? We've seen that over and over again in the Eli Drinkowitz offense. So you match those 2 things up. I mean, Kevin Coleman, I think we're looking at, again, over or close to 1,000 yards, 6+ touchdowns. I understand maybe why folks are hesitant on him. I think they're a little worried about the quarterback situation, right? It's, you know, Bo Parabola seems to be the leader right now in the quarterback battle. He was only used at Penn State in kind of packagey, gimmicky situations. But to my understanding, it's not that he's a gimmicky quarterback. That was how he was used. I think he can throw from the pocket. And to my understanding, Sam Horn, who's a little bit more of a pocket passer and has experience, is pushing Parabola for that spot. So I don't know that it's locked in, that it's going to be the gadgety, more mobile quarterback. He could have a pocket passer in there. And, you know, I think that experience really could help Sam Horn potentially win this job, even if it maybe isn't right away, if Parabola struggles early, right? So I think there's a lot of, you know, even the downside to me is team, especially relative to the price. He's currently going 89 overall. He's wide receiver 30. In the consensus rankings with me and John, he's higher than that because I'm pulling him up. He's my wide receiver 21, right? So I'm in on Kevin Coleman at Mizzou. I'm a big fan of him. And John, that brings us to our extra selection here. You know, just picking a quarterback, running back, wide receiver wasn't enough. Wanted to give a bonus here. So our last group is going to be a flex group. It could be any position. You decided to go with wide receiver, and you took the Tennessee Vol.
I had to take it. We've discussed systems and scheme, right? And you just mentioned how much you like Drinkowitz's scheme for the slot receiver with Kevin Coleman. I like it also. But the quarterback is a little concerning. Tennessee. We had so much production. Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt. we were all in for a while, a couple of years there on Josh Heupel's passing game. Unfortunately, the reality is the last 2 years, Matt, it's not been very good, right? I mean, that's just the reality. So what does that tell me? When people are running away from a scheme that is good, I'm going to run towards it. While people are jumping off this Volunteers Josh Heupel's offense, Matt, that's opportunity in my book. And when I started to look at the depth chart, Mike Matthews kind of jumped off here right now. He's ADP on Fantrax of 210. He's going to be a player you don't have to draft highly. And he was one of the nation's top wide receiver prospects in 2024. Matt, he was a 5-star recruit and top 50 player in the nation. And we can argue, has Heupel recruited good receivers? Are they not being coached up? Like something's happening the last 2 years. But you know what, Matt? I'm not giving up on his scheme just yet. 3 years, then we can have a discussion next year. Mike Matthews has elite ball skills and athleticism. In high school, he played defense and offense. He enrolled in Tennessee very early in January of 2024. He was on the spring practice field. As a true freshman last year, let's be real, it wasn't overly impressive. 14 targets, 7 catches, 90 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I was like, oh, 2 touchdowns. That's not so bad. Fantasy point per game is nothing to look at, 3.3. But Matt, who else are you impressed with on that Volunteer depth chart right now? Right? You look at the depth chart, everyone, and there's no one that I'm like, oh my God, this is a guy like Tillman. This is a guy like Hyatt. A lot of them have left. Or they, they graduated or transfer portal or whatever. I think Matthews is the guy. I'll make the bet. Right now, he's on the depth chart. He should be starting in Josh Heupel.
Yeah, he will. He will.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Matt, we know that Heupel, when he gets the quarterback who can run a system, and there's questions, so I get it. But that's why it's factored into the low ADP.
Right.
It's all factored there. You're embracing risk, but at current ADP of 210, I'll take Mike Matthews all day also.
Yeah, I think that's a good identifier right there. You look at this Tennessee offense, it's a bit of, we'll call it a retooling year for the offense, right? New quarterback and most likely Joey Aguilar, new lead running back, right? And then you have, Brew McCoy, you have Deontay Thornton off, I'll say to the NFL. I'm not sure Brew McCoy is going to be on an NFL roster. But
he's probably
yeah. But that being said, it's really up to both Mike Matthews and I would say Chris Brazzell, right, is probably that next guy up. Or if you want to dig really deep and you want to hope Travis Smith Jr., the true freshman, comes in and makes a quick impact. But all that being said, right before, or I'd say in like the January window, Mike Matthews entered the transfer portal, was in there for a couple days, and decided to come back to Tennessee. They made a clear effort to make sure to keep him there. Matthews has since talked about that decision. And really what it came down to, it sounds like, is he saw Ryan Williams. He saw Jeremiah Smith, right? Cam Coleman, these other true freshmen who he was ranked very close to coming out of high school. I mean, he was in that same, he was 5-star in that same caliber of rankings. And he was seeing those guys make a quick impact. And, kind of what it came down to, he said, is that he wanted to stay at Tennessee. He wanted to trust the process, and he understood it was a two-way street, right? It wasn't just the Tennessee depth chart. He needed to improve and develop. And he also had a bit of a hamstring injury that nagged him early in that, critical fall camp, early season development period, right? So there's a lot of factors going into that. And that's a long way of saying, John, I think that's a good identifier from somebody who follows Tennessee football closely. Yeah. That Mike Matthews could be and really should be the lead receiver. And, 9 out of 10 years, the lead receiver in the Josh Heupel offense is somebody that you're going to be screaming to get at a 200 ADP.
Yes.
And it's absolutely insane that John has identified the Tennessee player and I've identified the Alabama player in this situation. But I mentioned it. I've been watching and studying players. I've got about 22, I think, summer scouting reports logged so far for our Rookie Big Board patrons. And again, the link is in the episode description. If on top of those college fantasy football rankings, you want to start seeing my full scouting reports here for the 2026 class, because yes, I start that early. I did watch a good bit of the Alabama offense, and I did study Jam Miller as a legitimate, NFL draft pick, probably late day 2, early day 3 type guy. But watching him, I did come away, John, with somebody who's able to consistently win between the tackles. And if he gets an open gap, he can shoot that gap. And with a step, he can accelerate really well downfield. That's nice catching the eye. From the volume perspective, that's really what excites me more. You look at you think Alabama running back room, and you just instantly think rotation, right? Running back room rotation. That's not Kalen DeBoer, right?
No.
Kalen DeBoer is feed that back. You know what I mean? He is the lead back guy. Tried to study up a little bit on what the beat reporters are saying out of Alabama, and Kalen DeBoer has been very complimentary of Jam Miller this offseason. He's talked about his experience. He's talked about the fact that he is the lead guy, and he will be carrying the bulk of these carries. So last season, 145 carries, 668 yards, 7 touchdowns for Jam Miller. I expect that to increase significantly this year. I think Kalen DeBoer wants his lead running back. And, certainly like Richard Young will rotate in, and they'll get these other guys in. But in between the tackles and at the goal line, it's going to be Jam Miller. He's currently running back 41, 100 overall in ADP. I think he's exactly that mid-round type guy. And remember, these SEC schools, the schedule does get harder later on, but they open up with some easy weeks, right? And not, I think Alabama has maybe a big one to start, if I'm remembering right.
I think you
Florida
are right.
State to start, but after that, they get some of those cupcakes opponents. So you're going to get some good early season production out of Jam Miller. And I think that's going to set you up very nicely, again, for a guy that you're drafting, at the 100 spot in terms of ADP. So there you go, folks. That is 8 players that we have identified from the Power 4 as our college fantasy football sleepers. Like I said, you want those full rankings as well as all the other resources. That's going to be in the episode description, patreon.com/rookiebigboard. Free newsletter also in the episode description. And don't you dare think that we are done with college fantasy football content. We are eagerly awaiting the underdog contest to officially drop. We're going to do some live drafts. We're going to do some more college fantasy football content leading up to the season. So make sure you're subscribed, and we're going to be back real soon with some more college fantasy football content.